Welcome back. Today's episode is with the founder of GembaRed, a red light therapy company that has quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, called bullshit on the flashy, overpriced wellness tech industry. He's an engineer by training, a skeptic by nature, and one of the few people in the space who's willing to peel back the marketing layers and talk about what actually matters when it comes to biomodulation. Things like dosage, flicker, EMF, and how to read through the noise. We're going to get into it today, and if you've ever wondered whether red light therapy is legit or not, this episode is going to be for you. My guest today, Andrew LaTour.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, brother. Thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
It's a super interesting topic that, all the biohackers and all the wellness folks have been, really jumping in on the past couple of, years, maybe the last 5-6 years. It's been a pretty big, jump towards this. And, me specifically, I'm a huge believer in it, having used some red light devices, within my healing, and as well as just the way that I feel after I go outside into the sun. And so knowing that light is a healer, thank you very much for coming on the show today, brother. I'm curious to ask the question about how, what got you into, photobiomodulation, what got you into, doing this, and building this company, GembaRed.
Yeah, I mean, kind of goes back. I had, health issues my whole life. I had a vaccine injury when I was 2, and it kind of seemed to wreck my immune system. I had, respiratory issues my whole life, asthma, pertussis, constantly getting prescribed antibiotics for every, sniffle I ever had. Run to the doctor, get more antibiotics. So had a tough, childhood of illness and sickness and hospital visits and whatnot, and obesity and being overweight and struggling with a lot of that stuff. So my wife kind of introduced me into some of the alternative health stuff while after I graduated college for engineering. She showed me this like far infrared biomap product. And it was, kind of goofy with all the marketing of like, oh, we have 14 different layers of different materials and tourmaline and amethyst crystals and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't know, so even then, like you introduced, I was like, that doesn't sound right to me, of like this whole pamphlet of like marketing layers. And I was like, I don't know. But, I knew how to research. So I just went into, the scholarly, peer-reviewed articles and looked up far infrared and, the benefits of heat therapies and whatnot. And I was like, wow, okay, there is some legit science of it. Obviously, the companies take the marketing to, a layer that I don't appreciate, but there's a good background and foundation for far infrared stuff. And so I was using it for like low back pain and, that kind of sweating and detox kind of stuff. And got into, heat lamps and biohacking and looking up, the different, diets and lifestyles that were completely new to me. I just kind of thought, your health was kind of, it is what it is, and you didn't really have a lot of control over it. And then once I learned you had control over it and you can do it kind of scientifically, of being this biohacker, of trying new things and appreciating the feedback your body gives to you and trying to improve and implement new things, that was what I really got into, the kind of scientific method of, treating your own body as a human experiment and not being afraid of, trying new things and failing and learning from your failures are all a part of it as well. So, in the biohacking sphere, I started seeing these red light devices, LED panels, come on market around 2016, 2017. They were starting to, a couple companies were starting to get introduced at the biohacking conferences. And I looked at them too, and I was like, they're kind of goofy with how they're marketing. And, LED technology is really simple. It's been around for a couple decades. I couldn't understand why it was so expensive. And, all these flashy marketing things. So I started digging into it and, kind of stumbled my way into, talking with manufacturers, talking with, LED suppliers. And then, I kind of just like went into it and said, hey, I'm going to start a business. So I started selling in 2018. I got, my first panels on the market, and, I was just very authentic with it. I got my panels third-party tested before any other panel company had third-party testing. They didn't even know the concept. They were, measuring their intensity with these solar power meters that, measure the intensity falsely high because they're not properly calibrated for red and near-infrared wavelengths. So all this stuff that I came in just super authentic, evidence-based, nothing special, no gimmicks. And, that was a risk because, like, how can you compete in a market that's all about these gimmicks and flashy stuff? So that was kind of a test for myself in the market to see if a company like me could even survive. But it's worked out, it's worked out. I think the authenticity really shines through, and I just provide simple evidence-based products, and I provide my blogs and my research as anyone can use, from my competitors or people like that. The whole industry seems to be benefiting from the research I've done and being able to put it together on my blogs and articulate the science. So so it's worked out. Now I've got over a dozen products like on my website, GembaRed.com, different panels, shapes and sizes, and conveniences and wavelengths and whatnot. So there's a lot of potential for red light therapy to be implemented, for people's daily lives, improve your health, reduce pain, improve your quality of life, improve energy, sleep. It's such a foundational technology that we'll probably get into.
Knowledge is power. It's that's what I'm hearing, because if you bring knowledge and you bring real research that people can't really put holes in, that's where that's where power comes from. And any influencer, some person who marketing company or just a red light company that throws something out there, you said they're now learning from you, which is pretty cool. Some of them, instead of trying to double down and say, hey, this guy's wrong, we're gonna go fight with him, they're like, oh, maybe we can learn something here and change the way we do business.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all kind of goofy of their learning from my blogs on one hand, and then the parts of the blogs they don't like, of like it's all about high intensity, it's all about having tons of wavelengths, and all these gimmicks that they have to kind of like cherry pick from my blogs of like what they like and what they don't like, and it's all kind of under the table of not giving me credit. So yeah, it's gotten the competition part, it gets kind of nasty, and then I have to call people out to first off defend myself. It's not like I particularly enjoy calling people out, but if they're doing the wrong things, they're spreading information that's now I think is getting pretty dangerous with these high intensity devices, and reckless recommendations that you can have tons of heat and you can overdose. Like, why would you recommend stuff like that? So that's what I've gotten more outspoken as years go on, because it's disturbing to me to see people having adverse reactions to red light therapy when it's one of the safest therapies in the world, that's so beneficial even at low doses and intensities, that why would you have to make it so reckless? It's kind of mind-boggling.
That is mind-boggling, and I'm going to ask you about that right after I ask you about how you came about the name GembaRed.
Yeah, Gemba is a term I learned in engineering of my professional career. Especially a lot of companies, they derive terminology from Japan with the Toyota Way is a book that we kind of learn a lot of these lean efficiency methodologies that came from Toyota. It kind of started with like Ford and the assembly line, and then some guys went over to Japan to help them rebuild their economy, and then Toyota really took that and transformed it into this lean terminology of like how to run an efficient with no waste and focusing on value to the customer, and not making things extravagant, not making things more than what they need to be, of like, hey, how do we satisfy the customer right, spot on, not too much, not too little. So the term you might have heard of like Kaizen, which means a small change, like incremental improvements, that's a Japanese term you might have heard. Gemba is also a Japanese term of the place where value is kind of created, and so that can be a lot of times it's a manufacturing floor. You have to go to the manufacturing floor, see how the products are being produced in real time. You can't just sit back in your office or have a meeting of like, how to do things. You have to go look and go to where the value is actually being created. But it's, it could be value in any part of your business structure. So that's my focus, is the Gemba is the where we're creating value, and it's not, gimmicks are not value, I mean? So additional features that don't improve the quality and the experience for customers, they're not really functionally important. So that's why it's all about what's the real value. So yeah, Gemba kind of comes from that value, and then just red at the end.
Yeah, it's an awesome name. It's definitely what you're doing. It's actually how I found you, was because somebody made a recommendation based on you having the best value for your lights, and when I came and took a peek at them, I was like, oh man, we're talking like these are like a third of the cost of some of the bigger companies, and I'm like, that's absurd. Why is he able to sell these lights at this price compared to his competitors? And then I kind of dug into it. I was like, oh man, this guy actually knows what's going on here. There's something here. So you're creating a ton of value. And because there are definitely companies who are out there selling junk, and you were just alluding to it, with intensity and and heat. And so what are some of the biggest lies or half truths that you're seeing right now in the industry?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes down to, teaching people the basics, and teaching people the basics in an evidence-based way. And so that's what I've kind of gone through very systematically in my analysis and my blogs of like, hey, you need LEDs, which are, cheap and abundant. You need maybe 1 or 2 wavelengths of red and near infrared. So typically we're talking about the red range is, the 600. So you'll see wavelengths 630, 660, 670, whatever. So you get some red wavelengths. And then near infrared, it's typically in the 800s of the nanometers. So wavelength is that kind of electromagnetic frequency. Our eyes can see certain colors because we can, we have the receptors in our eyes that we identify certain wavelengths as certain colors. But then past red, we've got near infrared, which is invisible, but it's the closest to the red. So that's why it's called near infrared. So we work with a lot of the near infrared. So when we say red light therapy, usually it's implied we're talking about red and near infrared as that optical window. So we just kind of shorten it down to red light therapy. But near infrared is very important because it penetrates deeper. It has less scattering once it enters the skin. And so usually you're working with in the 800s of 810, 830, 850, even higher is sometimes okay. So those are the 2 main ranges of red and near infrared that you probably want in a device. And again, there's nothing particularly, special about these wavelengths. The 660 wavelength came from, it's used in the grow light industry a lot. So it's easy. It's already mass produced. It's already cheap. There's nothing special about it. You don't have to say, oh, we're the only ones that can do this. 660 is super common. And then 850 is also very common because that was mass produced for the security camera industry. So you could have gotten your little security camera light, cover up the sensor. I'm going to do a little video about this soon. Cover up the sensor, and you can use that as a red light therapy hack for like $50. So those were already mass produced. So these are cheap, abundant LED wavelengths. Like you hear a lot of people talk funny of like, oh, you really need, specific wavelengths, that kind of implying only one company can produce. It's like, no, they're already mass produced. They're all over the marketplace. They're cheap. They're abundant. That's what makes, again, red light therapy so cheap and accessible that anyone can reach it. So that's the key thing is, and then, there are some wavelengths that are getting some hype recently of longer 1060, 1070, 1072 of a little bit longer wavelengths. So you get a little bit more water absorption with those wavelengths. But the trade-off is there's less scatter because longer wavelengths don't scatter as much, so they can penetrate a little bit deeper. So that's a good trade-off. And then there's novelty with those wavelengths of like, those are hard to get. They are expensive. I tried to get some LEDs. They were trying to charge me like $9 per 1060 LED, which is crazy because like a normal LED should cost like 10 cents.
Can you explain that to me a little bit? How, like, what the when you're like, because you're saying like inventing wavelengths, like there, like a bulb is invented or a wavelength is invented. What does that process look like?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, a lot of these wavelengths were, you could call it invented back in the 1960s through the 80s. So they're not particularly new. They're kind of new to the commercial marketplace of commercial marketing, but they're kind of old, that they've been around. So with a laser or an LED, you use a specific type of material and you kind of energize it with electricity, and then it radiates the light, what we call light, or sometimes it's invisible light like near infrared. So with lasers, you have a certain medium. The original laser used a ruby crystal. So they energized the ruby crystal and it made that nice red laser. And then, other lasers will use like helium, neon, HENE, and that's the 633 laser. So you're kind of confined to what the materials can produce. So it's not like we can choose any wavelength we want. So like I said, 850 is very common, and it uses like a specific semiconductor crystal. And, as the electrons pass through this crystal, the electrons drop like down to a lower energy state, and then they emit light to resolve the different energy states. So they emit certain frequencies of light. So that's kind of how they do it. So you're kind of confined to different things. So you do get a little bit more expensive with the longer wavelengths because they're not as mass produced, and the materials aren't as readily available. So there's a lot of commercial and economic reasons why you might choose wavelengths, aside from, this wavelength will cure everything. But if it's a wavelength that's very expensive to produce, then it's just not practical to make right now. So and the 1064 wavelength is a very common laser wavelength, but it's hard to make it with an LED right now. So that's the thing. People are just kind of chasing novelty and scarcity, and it's not like it's that much more superior than the 850 that is very commonly accessible. So we don't want people to not use red light therapy because, some influencer said you really need 1064 based on a couple of studies, when 850 could get you similar results and you don't need to worry about it. So, and you can get, all these wavelengths from the sun or from an incandescent bulb or from a heat lamp. So, don't worry about the scarcity. We're using like specific wavelengths of red and near infrared for a therapeutic response. We're not trying to like reverse engineer sunlight or, kind of do anything goofy of, we can just live indoors and just use some, all these wavelengths of LEDs. That's not the goal. We're just trying to create a therapeutic effect. That's just one aspect of health. You can still go outside and get sunlight for that full spectrum, which includes all these wavelengths we're talking about.
Now, that's amazing. I think that the sun is like such a beautiful tool that people don't even, we vilify it. We vilify it so much. We make it seem like it's this thing that's hurting us and harmful to us, when there's nothing in the world that makes me feel better than going outside and getting a little bit of sun.
Yeah, for sure. And so, sunlight is kind of that ultimate, holistic, you think about like your whole food, your full spectrum. You need that every day to get that. And sunlight has the ultraviolet and the blues and the greens and the yellows and all that stuff, which, too much ultraviolet, you get the sunburns, and, you have to worry about, too much exposure and things like that. But with red and near infrared light, they're some of the safest wavelengths available on the sunlight spectrum, because they're not high frequency like the UVs and the blues, so they can't cause that photochemical damage that UV and blue can do. And then, they don't produce a lot of heat because they're not superficially absorbed. They penetrate deeply. The longer wavelengths, the mid-infrareds and the far infrareds, like you use for your sauna, those are more superficially absorbed, and that's why we feel them as heat, because they get absorbed by the water in our skin. So that's why those are good for the sauna wavelengths for heating the skin. But the near infrared and red and near infrared, the therapy has always been mostly non-thermal. They don't create a large heating response, and the wavelengths and the intensities we use, aren't kind of a heat therapy. You get a little bit of warmth depending on the context, but it's not all about the heat therapy. It's about getting the right kind of stimulation to get our mitochondria to improve their function.
Forgive me for, lacking the scientific brain on this one, but when you're talking about like the heat in a sauna, how is that light?
So the far infrared saunas are, they've got the panels all the way around you, and then they kind of usually like a carbon panel, so it's a black kind of panel, and then you just run electricity through it. It heats up, and then it radiates far infrared. So all objects are radiating some far infrared. You and I, if you have a little far infrared camera like I've got over here, you and I would be red compared to our background would be cooler. The electronics that are on, they'll be red. So everything's emitting far infrared because that's just kind of the Planck's law of everything above, absolute zero is emitting some far infrared because, entropy and everyone's trying to reach equilibrium. So then you heat up the carbon panels and that radiates the far infrared. So it's more of a direct heating effect. With traditional sauna, you're heating up the air mostly, and then the air, is transferring the heat to your skin, or you've got steam in the sauna. And so the steam is more efficient at transferring heat onto your skin and your body that way. So where it's all about heat transfer. So with far infrared, it's more superficially absorbed, and near infrared is shorter wavelengths. It penetrates the deepest because it's not as absorbed well by water. So actually, it's kind of a lot of times people will say, oh, longer wavelengths penetrate deeper, but that's true up until the point of you have a lot more water absorption past 1100 nanometers of wavelength. So, you have to keep that in mind. So there's kind of a limitation to that generalization.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because like the infrared saunas that I've been in, they don't have the panels all the way around them. They have like one small panel that's like kind of right in front of you. And in my head, I wasn't thinking that was the entire way that the sauna was being heated.
Right. So if you've got like I think the Clearlight brand, they have the black heat panels all around you, and then in the front they might have their full spectrum heater, or they've got some sort of LED device that you mount as kind of an optional thing in the front. And that kind of can give you a general, they claim it's like full spectrum or whatnot, kind of vague claims that you don't need red light therapy because they've included some of the red and near infrared wavelengths in their sauna. And, that might be good for general wellness, but for like the real therapeutic effects of photobiomodulation, they don't deliver, light therapy that way. You have to have specific, intensity. And usually that requires either the right distance from the device because the intensity drops off, as you move further away from a device because the power spreads out over more area. And a lot of studies use skin contact. They press the laser or the LED device right on the skin, and that minimizes reflection losses. So we get a lot of reflection losses with red and near infrared light. Ironically, they're the highest reflected wavelengths off of our skin out of the entire spectrum. But that's kind of what makes it so special is that scattering and reflection. Once you get it in the skin, it can penetrate deeply because it's scattering and penetrating into the body.
Change for people? Does that change for people who are lighter skin versus darker skin? Because I know within with what I do with video production and stuff, the reason my background is black is because it reflects the light better.
Yeah. So your skin color is a big part of light therapies. And I was one of the first, again, blogs to really tackle this of like, your skin type matters. And especially with the red, the visible wavelengths, that'll be absorbed if you have darker skin types, if you have more melanin in the skin, because melanin is a strong absorber of light. It's very efficient at absorbing, UV and blue, but it does still absorb a lot of light in the reds and in the near infrareds. Usually after 1400 nanometers, then melanin absorption kind of drops off. It's kind of negligible. But that plays a big role. So melanin will absorb a lot of red wavelengths more superficially than if you have a lighter skin type with less melanin, then the red is going to penetrate deeper. So if you have a darker skin type, you might prefer more near infrared, the 800s, or even if you can find the 1050s and 1060s, those will penetrate a little bit deeper because they're bypassing the melanin in the skin. So, and then there's, some other adjustments to dosing. If you have a darker skin type, because it's absorbing more light superficially, it causes more heat. So there's been specific studies on this that people with darker skin type will end up with those heat damage earlier, depending on the dose. They could, a lighter skin person can tolerate a higher dose because the light is penetrating deeper. It's not being concentrated on the surface of the skin. But if you have a darker skin type, you have to be more cautious with overheating the skin and getting blisters, heat blisters and whatnot, skin redness from it, and even hyperpigmentation response, as that kind of ROS and nitric oxide causes hyperpigmentation. So that can be a big concern for people using red light therapy, especially for skincare. People with darker skin types have to be more cautious because their melanocytes will respond more to that light stimulus, and they could create patches of hyperpigmentation, or could exacerbate. If they have melasma, they have to be more cautious with exacerbating pre-existing melasma.
So you're saying that people with darker skin types need to be a little bit more careful with.
Yeah, I'd say, just, if a manufacturer, like my products, you kind of don't, like with most products, you don't need to be more careful, because if they're designed responsibly and you use them responsibly, every skin type should be safe and effective. And then there's some small modulations. So like if you want deeper tissue treatments, if you had a darker skin type, you might need a little bit more time to make sure more photons penetrate deeply. You might need to turn down the intensity if you feel too much heat. So again, these are general considerations that all people should, be mindful of. But just these small tips could help, people with one way or the other. But yeah, just be mindful, not too much heat. You shouldn't feel burning. You shouldn't be tolerating anything silly. And if you have a darker skin type and you're doing a deeper tissue treatment, you might need a little bit more exposure time than what most of the studies use. Unfortunately, is Caucasian skin of lighter skin types. So you have to be mindful if you're referencing a study that doesn't match your skin type.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, because you would like when you think of UV light, you would think that people who have darker skin are more protected from the UV light, and this is the opposite.
Right, they're more protected, but they also don't produce as much vitamin D. That was actually a correlation I was making, that if you have a darker skin type, you need like 4 times more sun exposure than a lighter skin type. So that's why vitamin D deficiency is huge for people with darker skin types in the big cities and, in rural areas where they're not getting as much sun. And that leads to all kinds of other problems, diabetes and whatnot. So yeah, the UV, you're protected, with the Fitzpatrick skin type scale of 1 to 6, that kind of categorizes your risk of sunburn and your risk of cancer. But it also tells you, hey, you need more time out in the sun to get adequate ultraviolet and vitamin D production.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting, and that also makes like a lot of sense intuitively. What is the like most people who are going to, just to talk a little bit more about some like the marketing grifts that are out there, so what does it look like that somebody is telling a client or a potential customer, like, hey, we've figured out how to do this and this specific wavelength, and this is what you need? What are like the most common the most common mismarketing that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think, after you figure out the wavelength, which I think it's more easy than people say, get a couple of good wavelengths, you're good to go. Then you focus on proper intensity and your, what people call the dosage, which is the energy density, the joules per centimeter squared. So you have intensity, which is your kind of power output. You can think of it as like the brightness of a light, even though with near infrared, it's invisible. So you can't really talk about brightness that way, but that's kind of how we think of it. Intensity is that like brightness. But in engineering units, it's milliwatts per centimeter squared. So it's power per unit area. And then you want your dosage in a joules per centimeter squared, which there's kind of some fallacies with that, but you want a certain amount of energy. So that's your intensity and your absorption time, under the light. So unfortunately, like with red light therapy, it's not like popping a pill. You have to spend at least a couple minutes with it a day, or per treatment session, 5 to 15 minutes a day, getting this red light therapy. So it's not a quick fix, but you have to use it for a certain amount of time. So one of the gimmicks is that you say, oh, well, we deliver high intensity and that'll shorten your treatment time to get the same amount of energy absorbed. So again, it's kind of like that fallacy of like our body's just some simple energy machine that's energy in, energy out, like calories in, calories out, like all these kind of models that turns the body into like an energy balance machine that's simpler than like a car engine, when it's actually a lot more complicated. So intensity, I usually say, hey, you only need about 5 to 50 milliwatts per centimeter squared. One recent study only used 2.9 milliwatts per centimeter squared. So super, super low, like people would not even believe, because a lot of the original books and a lot of the original blogs and all the major brands said, oh, you need at least 100 milliwatts per centimeter squared. So above 100, which is like a nice marketable number.
Yeah.
I feel like 100 is like, boom, that's a nice number. I want 100. But it was a complete fabrication based on false measurements with the solar power meters, and based on just this gimmick of like more power is better and it penetrates deeper and it saves you time. And none of those promises have held true, especially over the years. All those claims have really eroded, and even the guys that originally made those claims are backpedaling on them. So it's just like a complete embarrassment. But that residual lie has, pervaded the industry, and it's still going on. I still see doctors and influencers will say, oh, you really need 100 milliwatts per centimeter squared. I'm like, where are you even getting this number? Because it's not written in any peer-reviewed publications. In fact, a lot of publications say you need to be less than 100 to reduce the heat risks. So less than 100 is ideal for red light therapy. And usually I say, hey, like I said, 5 to 50 is the really good range. You're going to be very safe. You're going to be very effective. You don't have to worry about overheating and whatnot. And you're going to get your exposure time in the right range. Usually 5 to 15 minutes is a good place to start. And you just do it. You can start every other day because it's so effective. Your cells, your mitochondria gets upregulated for about 48 hours after a treatment time, after your session has ended. So that's why a lot of treatment protocols in the clinical studies, they only do treatments 2 or 3 times a week, and they space them out at least 48 hours to make sure that cumulative response doesn't get overboard. So it's kind of that, a lot of people are learning basic pharmacology of more of a drug or more of a therapy is not always better, right? So you wouldn't say, hey, just keep taking aspirin until you feel better. You wouldn't do red light therapy for hours until you feel better. You have to do, 1 15-minute session, wait a day or two, do another one, and it's a cumulative response. Unfortunately, it's not always like a instant gratification kind of thing. You have to give it some time, a couple weeks, a lot of times, to really start to feel those long-term benefits. And you have to have patience. You can't overdo it. So so that's what I've been fighting against, is the high intensity kind of gimmick. And like I said, a lot of the influencers and brands that make that claim, they know it's wrong. They know they based it off of false measurements, but they can't. It's like such a profitable claim, and they can't backpedal the most important claim they've ever made, because then you might start to question all their other gimmicks. So they just can't. They're locked into their own lies. So it's kind of rough. But like I said, red light therapy is cheap, low intensity, low energy. You need adequate exposure time, 5 to 15 minutes, 20 minutes is okay. And you can do it every other day. You can do it daily. If you have a more acute issue, you might do it daily, or even twice a day for if you have a really severe issue, to get the healing kick-started, but then you would taper off and reduce your exposure over time. But that's it. So I try to focus on, like, here's how to do it the right way. If everyone else is kind of making up stuff, that's on them, but this is the simplest way to do it.
Cannabis products are becoming more popular every day. Whether you're looking for the best night's sleep, trying to mitigate daily stress, or just trying to enjoy some laughter with friends, OG Cannabis is the store for you. OG Cannabis has an unbiased approach that is unique and simple. Unlike the competition, they don't sell their own manufactured products, but instead proudly showcase the best vendors across Maine. A dispensary like no other. Come and visit today at 18 American Way, Elliott, Maine. OG Cannabis. Oh, and don't forget to use my promo code, Dr. BeeWell. See you guys there. Giddy up. Are all of your GembaRed products dialed in at the same, at the same output between 5 and 50?
No. So there's kind of a variety. So I do have some products with tiny diodes that are more like the skin contact devices. So it's kind of more mimics like how a laser would be of tiny diodes. So it's not a lot of power, but because it's such a tiny diode, the intensity is around 60 to 80. But once it gets in the skin, it kind of diffuses out to the sides. What you don't want to do is kind of saturate your whole skin with like high intensity, because then it has nowhere to go. So there is a lot of nuance with my products. It's not very consistent. Of like, some of my products are really low intensity, around 7 or 8 milliwatts, and I say those are amazing if you're getting first started with it. You can't overdo it. Your kids can use it. Your pets can use it. No one's going to be able to hurt themselves on it, and you get great results. It is like unbelievable. But then I have some more targeted, higher powered stuff if you really have deep tissue like pains. So some of the higher powered targeted stuff is really good for the joint pain, your wrist, your elbows, your knees,
And that's the
all
near
that stuff.
infrared, right? When you're going deeper, that's what you're saying, and you want to be touching.
Yeah, I almost always do a combo of red and near infrared, because I think red is synergistic and it does penetrate quite well, especially when you use skin contact and you press it into the skin. So I usually do a combo. I think they're very synergistic. Near infrared is generally preferred for deeper tissue because, like I said, it penetrates a bit deeper, and red is a little bit more for superficial and skincare. But that's kind of another just marketing oversimplification that people are like, oh, I only want red for skincare and I only want near infrared for deep tissue, when there's so much overlap. There's one great study that showed that near infrared was better for skincare, especially for deeper wrinkles. And then there's studies that use red all the time for pains and aches and pains and deep tissue stuff. So there's so much overlap of these kind of benefits and mechanisms that it kind of gets too much of it. Again, it's generally true, but it's it's a marketing oversimplification. Most of the time, you do very well combining at least one wavelength of red and one wavelength of near infrared, and you kind of cover all your bases. You get synergistic effects no matter if you're doing deep tissue or skin, superficial stuff.
Now, what are some of like the risks when you talk about like people over, using too much red light? Like what would happen? What would people see? What type of symptoms would they have?
Yeah, I mean, usually, it is self-limiting in that if people feel heat and they feel warmth and they feel a lot, you need to back off your device, either move further away until it doesn't feel very heat. You can turn on a fan and blow cool air on yourself. I've been recommending to people that use my competitors' products, so like, cool yourself off so you don't overheat your skin, because you'll see the skin redness, the erythema. Sometimes hyperpigmentation will come out of that, but usually it's skin redness, and it only lasts a couple hours or a day and it subsides. But you really shouldn't be seeing that. You see a lot of reports of people having like what people kind of falsely call like detox reactions and Herxheimer reactions of like, but I think that's kind of an oversimplification of like, there's something off. They're getting a stress response. They feel a little overstimulated from this high intensity, too much power and all that. So it's kind of a lot of funny business. Again, I don't really get that with my products, but you see it on social media a lot with people talking about their weird kind of side effects and if other people are feeling it, and a lot of people do. So you can't, it's not like you cause any harm. So if we say like overdose, it's not like a drug overdose where you have like a severe reaction. With red light therapy, if you overdose, either your benefits are less optimal, which in this industry, if you say someone is doing something suboptimal, it's like the biggest insult you can tell, of like, oh, you don't have the best wavelengths, oh, you don't have the best intensity, and people lose. You just said my stuff is crap. Well, like, no, it's just not optimal. You know what I mean? So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying, oh, it's all crap. I'm just saying it's not optimal. There's unnecessary risks with, high intensities, especially of like, you could get better results with lower intensities. So yeah, that's about it. So it's kind of goofy. There really shouldn't be any major side effects. There's some contraindications of like, we don't know with pregnancy, you don't want to directly use red and near infrared on your abdomen when you're pregnant, unless your doctor really approves it or you're willing to take on the risk, because it's just not been studied. There's no indications that it would cause harm, but we just, there's not enough studies to say we can recommend it during
Probably
pregnancy. So, stuff like that. Yeah, we don't want lawsuits if, we don't know, and then that's the thing. People kind of correlate of like, oh, I'm feeling funny and I just started using red light therapy, and you're going to blame red light therapy, but could be, anything else. It's a correlation. The same thing with like eye health is a big question of, can red and near infrared light damage your eyes? Or there's kind of this insidious question of, can it cause cataracts in the long term, like the glass blowers cataracts and the foundry workers and the all those people working in those high temperature environments, they get cataracts in 15 years later because there's this like delayed cataract response. And so a lot of those old studies on glass blower cataracts, they were kind of pinning it on near infrared in the environment, when they were working. But there's also like a ton of heat. There was no safety controls. There's no glasses. It's just completely uncontrolled environment. And so when they added the eye protection, it actually, it significantly reduced the cataracts. But it's mostly a heat issue, and it's not really correlated to intensity or wavelength or things like that. So they've shown in controlled studies that near infrared does not cause cataracts unless you let the eye tissue overheat beyond like 10 degrees Celsius or something crazy. So it's pretty out there. So it shouldn't cause any eye damage. Again, low intensities, generally less than 50. There's one standard that says that you can tolerate 10 milliwatts per centimeter squared for an infinite amount of time. Like if you go out in the sunlight, you're getting 10 to 30 milliwatts per centimeter squared of near infrared from sunlight, but we don't wear welding goggles when we're outside in the sun, and sunglasses don't protect you from near infrared. They only protect you from UV and blue and some of the visible light, but they don't protect you from near infrared. If there was really a cataract issue, then sunglasses would have been made with near infrared blocking technology as well. So it's kind of a goofy idea, but generally, if you use low intensity, and like most of my competitors show, they know they're selling reckless products. They have to mandate that people wear goggles with their products, but it's kind of bad. Yeah. So so eye health, again, low intensity, which is good, safe for the skin, safe for your eyes. Like it shouldn't be like any kind of thing of like, oh, congratulations, we made our product so powerful you have to wear goggles to protect your eyes from it, when there's tons of benefits that can be gotten for your eye health. All these recent studies of like, improving colored vision, which Dr. Glenn Jeffrey's group has constantly demonstrated. It's made mainstream news. But again, just low intensities. It's good for your eyes, good for your skin, good for your body, and just get adequate exposure time. And that's it. There's nothing, I'm not selling anything special. You can get it from me. You can get it from some cheap devices on Amazon. It's so accessible. You don't have to buy the latest name brand product, the latest generation that's going to scorch your eyeballs. There's no extra value to that. So that's my whole.
I always trust a guy who's saying like, buy my product, but also maybe there's other products out there too. I just think that I'm doing it the best because I'm doing this research, but you don't have to do it my way because the technology still exists.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the hallmark of a charlatan is like, oh, I have this special technology. It's patented, it's proprietary, it's, all these red flag terminology that, FDA approved, blah, 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 all that exclusive wording, and it creates kind of scarcity. That's the hallmark of a charlatan. But I'm like teaching, you can do this on your own. My blogs apply to any device on the market of following the science and doing things the right way. And, I just provide products for convenience for people of, hey, I'm doing things the right way, low EMF, low flicker, the right wavelengths, low intensity, skin contact, just checking all the boxes of simple things. There's no gimmicks. There's no LCD screens. There's no Bluetooth. There's no Wi-Fi modules. There's no, all this fancy stuff. It's just simple, basic products,
Yeah, simple healing. Simple healing. I love it. Now, before I ask you about some of the products, because you're just talking about the eyes and the melanocytes. Now, there's been like a big thing online, recently, and maybe it's a gimmick, maybe it's not. I don't really know, but there's a lot of influencers who are telling people that, wearing sunglasses and being out in the sun is not a good thing for you, and it's actually like can be hurting your vision. Where do you land on that one?
I prefer no sunglasses. So there is that, like you said, the opsin, I forget the specific name for it, but there's a UVB triggered like opsin or melanocyte in our eye that signals our skin to produce more melanin to protect us from the UV that's landing on our skin. So you're kind of, if you wear sunglasses in direct sunlight, you're kind of tricking your brain into producing less melanin, and then you'll get more likely to get a sunburn wearing sunglasses. So it's kind of like, maybe it's contradictory. But again, I would wear sunglasses like if I'm driving and I don't want glare and I don't want to crash my car. That's a more immediate issue than, caring about all that fancy stuff. So there's some practical reasons you can wear sunglasses and it won't give you cancer right away. But I prefer wearing, a hat, big wide brimmed hat, get the shade, practical, minimize the sunscreen usage. If I can wear long sleeve white, kind of clothing that reflects the light. So stuff like that. So yeah, I generally agree. I try to minimize using sunglasses outdoors. But there's certainly cases where you can wear sunglasses if you really need it.
I'm glad to hear that one, because this was another intuitive one for me, where I know what my body feels like in the sun, and so I wear less sunscreen than other folk. And once I kind of heard that maybe this is, something that's counterintuitive to us producing more melanin in our skin by wearing the sunglasses, I was like, yeah, I'm done. Right. I'm done wearing those. I'm like on the beach, and it's not a big deal that if there's a little bit of glare in my eyes that I can't see because I'm not driving. I think there could definitely be a time and place for them, for sure. Safety glasses, great, but when you're blocking the sun, it makes me think like, oh, that makes sense that we probably shouldn't be doing that, and we should be just learning how to integrate it the best into our system.
For sure. Yeah. It just kind of creates an artificial situation. I like the brightness of the sun and the mood boosting effect. So it's weird to wear sunglasses outdoors and like feel very dark, and like kind of messes your circadian rhythm of like wearing dark sunglasses all day. I don't even like wearing the blue blockers during the day, because I think, again, that kind of turns down my brain and slows me down a little bit. I only wear the blue blockers at night. But I also make sure my lighting is high quality during the day. So that's what's up with that? What's up with the blue light? Am I poisoning myself right now by being in my studio and getting sucked up by all this blue light that's being exposed to me from my computer and my phone? Yeah, I mean, yes and no. It's one of those things. All the official, mainstream publications and mainstream eye doctors and whatnot will say the intensities of blue light are below the threshold that can really cause acute or long-term harm according to the current studies. So they kind of poo-poo on all the blue blocking stuff. But I was a gamer for a long time, and I got into blue blockers because it made my eyes feel a lot more comfortable. While I was gaming, I would wear the old, I was into blue blockers before all the biohackers did, because it helped me perform on my video games. So, I knew about blue blockers for a long time. It makes your eyes feel a lot more comfortable when you're working on the computer for a long period of time, or especially at night. So there's two aspects. One is the blue light is that shorter wavelength, and it can cause harm at high enough intensities. We don't know the effects of long-term low dose blue light, and that's where the controversy is. But you can feel it, if you're sensitive to light, you'll feel it with your eye strain, with headaches, with migraines, with the flicker from certain screens as well. So there's, specific medically prescribed glasses, like the rose tinted glasses called FL41. That's kind of this more reddish kind of color that can help, that's prescribed for migraines to manage if you have light-induced migraines, and a lot of times that's triggered by the bright blue and green lights and the fluorescence and the LEDs. So there is a lot of medical reasons to wear it. I think just do what feels right. Get some cheap blue blockers from Amazon. Try them out, during the day if you feel better. You can get Uvex is, you know, a name brand safety glasses, but they make them in yellow, they make them in orange, you know, so get a couple from them, you know, try them out, see how you feel. So I think it's definitely worth turning down the blue in your devices. There's so many apps. There's a lot of it's built into the, you know, Windows and iPhones and Apple devices that they have it built in. You don't even need to download a separate app. It's built into the settings that you can reduce the blue light or, you know, change on different modes. So they know, you know, people have demanded these features for years. So now it's built into most devices. So you can turn it down, get your light bulbs right with low color temperature, like 2700 Kelvin is a nice color temperature for a lot of, you know, indoor usage. You want high CRI, which adds back in the red component that's missing from LED lights. So yeah, there's a lot of ways you can optimize your light environment, and it's not about gloom and doom. Oh, you're gonna, you know, wreck your whole body in a little bit. So I'm stimulating myself with high powered blue, you know, bluish kind of white lights, so that way I can stay stimulated and have my brain engaged when I'm talking to you. So it's kind of that trade-off of like, I'm increasing my performance right now with the stimulating blue light, but then I'm going to turn it off later.
Performance enhancing lights.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's I performance enhance my brain and my body all the time, you know, with the colors you choose, the wavelengths you choose. It's just part of your lifestyle.
Now, that's another question I wanted to ask about lifestyle, because there's been, you know, another, you know, big time podcaster, big time influencer who has talked about the effects of getting up in the morning and viewing sunlight, and, you know, and also, you know, taking out, you know, any type of blue light that is present, you know, 3 hours before you go to bed, or what, you know, whatever that number is. And I'm just curious what your take is on that and what you're doing to optimize your light environment.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I've got all these blogs and I've tested tons of bulbs. And so, you know, the whole kind of setup is that right way. I don't know if you want to plug the podcaster's name. Was it Huberman?
Yeah.
Huberman. So yeah, and we also need to go back and we have to give credit. Otherwise, you'll get a lot of comments if we don't give credit to Dr. Jack Kruse for he was the first one to talk about sunlight and blue lights, and also we have to give proper credit. It wasn't Andrew Huberman. It all goes back to Jack Kruse. He was the first person in the world to realize sunlight is the best.
Is there sarcasm in that?
Oh, no, of course not. I've never been sarcastic.
Uncle Jack, baby. He's going to let you know what he thinks.
Uncle. Listen, I watch a lot, like the videos from MedCram. The MedCram channel is really good, and all these things. And if you don't give credit to Jack Kruse when you're talking about the benefits of sunlight, there's tons of comments of like, Jack Kruse talked about this for ages ago, blah, blah. So we got to give him credit.
Definitely give him credit. And, you know, maybe we're going to get you two on a podcast together at some point. That would be a giddy up.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I saw how he talked to Casey Means on one of those podcasts. That was brutal. That was pretty rough.
And I thought that there could be some benefit, you know, not to get off topic here. I thought there could be some benefit from that conversation. And I was like, oh, just give it a little bit more space, a tiny bit more space, please, Jack. You know, I love what you're doing and I love that you're fighting back against this, but just a little bit more space.
Yeah, no, So that's the thing. It's like, I was getting frustrated this morning of like a lot of Jack's info is a little bit too esoteric and it's not very specific on like stuff other than just general, hey, get out in the sunlight, avoid blue light, avoid EMFs, avoid high flicker, use red light therapy, but he's very, you know, not very direct about how to use red light therapy, and he kind of gatekeeps and strings people along with that stuff. And so it's frustrating for me of like, it would be nice if he was an expert, he could like clearly have a blog about how to do red light therapy his way. And, you know, it doesn't have to confirm my biases. And just, it would be nice if things were just clear. Like that's all I want most of the time is like people to be clear and transparent and not be like kind of dancing around and stringing things along. So anyway, first thing I get up, I start brewing my coffee. I go step on my back porch. I got the morning sunlight coming in, and that's how I start my morning. Is I sip on my coffee on my back porch and get things going. Like I said,
what time does that start?
Well, I get up pretty late with around 8 o'clock. I do have sleep apnea, so that's one of my issues recently of working on that. So I'm on a machine and I have to sleep in. So anyway, yeah, but all this stuff helps, as my sleep issues kind of made me get into all this stuff and design all these products and optimize my light and share that stuff. But most of the time I probably just had underlying sleep apnea that wasn't diagnosed for years. So that my suffering I've turned into, helping other people. But yeah, so I do that, 8 o'clock is, as early as I can. Sometimes I get up earlier or later, get outside. It doesn't matter if it's cloudy, snowy, winter, summer, doesn't matter. Get outside in the morning, fresh air, sunlight, all that stuff. So there's nothing about, it's too cloudy, there's no point of going outside. Yes, there is. So it's very good to go outside. If I have time, I go outside in my yard, bare feet on the grass. You can ground a little bit. But yeah, otherwise, then I start my day. I come into the office, and then my office is not optimized for light because the landlord wouldn't change the bulbs. So I have my own bulbs of my own lamps and all this stuff. So I strategically placed all my bulbs in my lamps. And then, once nighttime comes around, my house, I kind of taper down of having amber bulbs and 2700 Kelvin, low blue light bulbs. And then the bedroom has just pure red light bulbs, just before bed. And then you turn off all the lights, blackout curtains, even I'm in a pretty rural area that doesn't get any lights anyway, but blackout curtains, pitch black, bedroom, and that's it. So yeah, it's about having your whole day is kind of planned out with circadian lights. And all my devices, like I said, I turn down the blue light significantly, so I don't really need to wear blue blockers often, because most of my bulbs and my devices are already turned down on the blue.
Yeah, so a lot of the influencers who are like wearing the blue blockers when it's like sunny outside just because they're on their phone, like that's pointless. Yeah.
Well, I don't. Yeah, it's hard because I wouldn't wear blue blockers outside, but yeah, I see a lot of the marketing imagery where they're like outside wearing blue blockers, and you're like, and I get it because it happens with like red light therapy marketing of like, you need to have bare skin with your red light therapy exposure. You don't want to wear clothes because that'll block a lot of the light. But then a lot of the marketing imagery, you can't be nude in a ad, so you kind of show people with some clothes on. But you want to be, if for like a full body exposure, you want to have as much bare skin as possible, as and that's why it's nice to do it in the comfort of your own home, because you can be just fully nude in front of your red light device, or a lot of targeted devices you just slip under your clothing and you can do targeted areas without having to strip down, so that's more convenient.
Now, for your what you're doing for your your photobiomodulation, are you and your red light, are you using one of your big panels, or do you use the specific ones that you put on your body? Which one are you using?
Yeah, I'd say, at this rate, it's kind of summer, so I don't do full body light therapy a lot. I just go out in the sun and, kind of do my normal stuff. But, once the fall and winter comes around, I'll do my full body lights like at least once or twice a week. And then, you don't have to do it a lot. But then, yeah, most of my time I'm just doing spot treatments because it's more convenient. I'll grab a light and do like my forehead for like kind of brain energy. I'll do kind of distance treatment into my face and my eyes in the mornings, because that's good for your eyes, it's good for your skin, it's good for setting your circadian rhythm, even with that bright red light. So I'll do distance treatment for my face in the mornings. I'll do, if my knees achy or, my back's achy, then I'll just put it on my back while I'm sitting on my chair. So yeah, it's really casual the way I do it, because I don't have anything major I'm really working on, but it's just kind of spot treatments here and there a couple times a week, and it's kind of a maintenance dosing right now. If I have like a flare up of an issue, then I'll do it a little bit more consistently.
Let me introduce you to Elevate, a premium functional mushroom company focused on supporting your highest potential. They offer a range of powerful supplements crafted from the finest medicinal fungi designed to naturally enhance your well-being. Elevate carries everything from mushroom tinctures, capsules, and teas to their delicious mushroom-infused coffees. All of their products are made with USA-grown mushrooms and contain only wild medicinal mushrooms, no psychoactive compounds. I personally use their focus tincture every day and love their chai tea blend. It's my go-to for a calming yet energizing boost. Elevate's products support mental clarity, immunity, and overall vitality. They ship nationwide, so whether you're new to functional mushrooms or already a fan, Elevate has something for you. Check them out at shopelevatemushrooms.com, where you will find a detailed description of each product and experience the difference for yourself. And have you seen tons of benefits with using the therapy?
Yeah, of course. It's everything from, like I said, the energy you get if you do it on your face and your eyes in the morning, the skincare. Someone just emailed me that they loved my hair has kind of gotten out of control with my facial hair and my locks of hair, but maybe that's a systemic benefit because I don't directly treat my head at all. But you kind of get these systemic benefits that it helps your whole body and your metabolism as you use it. So yeah, I think, I used to have chronic low back pain. That's gone. I would get I had a pinched shoulder from working out a couple of weeks ago, and I hit the light there a couple times during the week and, do some exercise. It's a holistic approach. So I do exercises. I have, anti-inflammatory supplements, turmeric and curcumin and all that stuff. So, it's always a kitchen sink approach for me of just throwing everything at it and, trying to get things resolved as quickly as possible. But it's not about using a ton of light. It's about using the right amount of light and then combining it with other exercises, holistic treatments, supplements, lifestyle. That's where you get your best bang for your buck.
Yeah, the aesthetics, man. That's one thing that I'm definitely going to try, and I'm likely going to do a little series on it. And, maybe we'll partner on it or something, but I want to show people what happens. I'm going to do a time lapse of maybe 90 days, maybe 120 days of what I'm pretty self-conscious about my hair. My hair is pretty thin. And so I want to hold on to it for as long as I can. And I've seen what people have done with, I haven't tried it on myself yet, and I haven't messed around too much with it, but what I'm seeing people do with, their hair and the positive benefits when they actually put the device on their hair, I've seen, and this is, I'm going to ask you because I've just seen people do it, and that you could manipulate a video pretty easily. But it seems like it's something that works. And then as well, the masks that people are using, that for wrinkles and for skin rehydration, I think that those seem like they are having benefits too, but I don't know if I'm just being tricked by the videos or if it's, it's actually some great outcomes.
Yeah, I think they're all great. I mean, there's really good studies on the hair regrowth and on the skincare, the wrinkles, the overall skin complexion and laxity, that elasticity, or I can't even say it. Yeah, but so tons of great skincare results. I think again, it's all about just low and slow and consistency with the helmets. They kind of do it every other day for low intensity. I think it's only 15 or 20 minutes. It's nice to get a helmet. I don't sell any helmets for hair growth, but it's got to be convenient that you just pop a helmet on you. You sit there for 15 minutes, do it every other day. And it's one of those things with the hair. I think you got to be patient with it and give it at least 6 months, maybe even a year, and really take some really good before pictures, like you said. Otherwise, the benefits are so subtle, especially with some of the skincare stuff and with the hair growth stuff, you might not realize it. But if you run into someone and they're like, "Oh, wow, your hair looks great," or, "your skin looks great," and you don't notice it because you look in the mirror every day and it's subtle, but other people will start to notice, and you got to have good before and after pictures. So there's definitely, I'd say it's one of those things is, I try not to put a lot of pressure on it. I try to under promise and over deliver of hey, if you just do this consistently and, a couple times a week at least, and low doses, and you have to trust the process and not just blast yourself and say, "Oh, I'm smarter than my biology. I'm just going to blast myself until I get results." that, you're not going to outsmart your biology. You have to give it time, good hydration, good diet, all that other stuff too. You can combine it with other, I don't know if you have other hair growth techniques. I think some of the, whatever the drug people use, the minoxidil or, yeah. So I think you can combine those and things like that. So, and I lost a lot of hair from like after I got COVID a bunch of years ago. And so I started the needle roller thing, and I had like, rosemary oil that I, mixed with coconut oil and got my hair all greasy. And so it felt like, and then the light. So again, it's a combination treatment. And so all those things together kind of really brought things back for me. So I haven't had any issues since then. And I just kind of casually, maintain my hair.
It looks thick over there, brother.
Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah.
I trust the rosemary. I love the rosemary. Rosemary is great. You know, another thing too is I sauna quite a bit. I sauna a lot, and they talk about maybe that sauna could affect it, and so I got to start wearing the sauna hat maybe. I don't know, because the high heat. And we'll see.
Yeah, I drape like a towel or something over my head, not for so much for the hair, but just because I don't like my head getting too hot. And I think if your head gets too hot, you try to bail out of the sauna earlier. And so a lot of the studies, if your head's poking out of the sauna, like some of those blankets, it's actually kind of better because you can tolerate it for longer. And so that's, I think, the benefit of wearing a sauna hat, or like I said, I just drape a towel over my head because I got a wool hat and it's all itchy. And I was like,
I don't know about this sauna hat. I don't know.
Yeah, just wear.
I've only worn them when I've just gone to my buddy's house, and these guys are like pretty serious sauna guys, and they all have, hey, try this sauna hat. I'm like, okay, giddy up, let's try it. Love it.
Yeah, just the peer pressure.
Yeah, exactly. It's like at first you're like, oh, I don't know, that thing kind of looks stupid, and then you're like, you put it on, you're like, oh wait, because it kind of keep my head a little bit less hot.
Yeah, it feels nice.
Yeah, that's cool in here, and we all got these hats on, so this is pretty cool.
Nice. Yeah.
It's so good. Now, do you think that you'll develop a face mask or a helmet, or that's not not something that's in your lane, or even blue blockers? Like, is that a product that you would ever offer, or no?
I made blue blockers a bunch of years ago, but yeah, then I kind of decided it was a lot of effort, a lot of marketing, a lot of contingent, and like I said, there's so many cheap options on Amazon these days, it's not really worth. So I'd rather review that kind of stuff and say, hey, here's some cheap options on Amazon for helmets and masks. And there's a couple of really good bloggers that are doing reviews of the skincare masks and all the big brands that are out there, Omnilux and Contour and all those different brands. So I think it's kind of so saturated and so competitive that sticking to the panels for me is kind of the best thing. And panels are very versatile, they last a long time, you can they're very low maintenance, you can't really break them. So that's the best way to keep my brand going, and the least kind of like I said, the least kind of issues possible of having some sturdy panels that people can use for all kinds of things. So you can use them on the face at a distance. Like I usually say, okay, set up your panel on a tabletop 12 inches away, 10 minutes every other day, and you get great skincare benefits from a panel. And for the head, that's the harder to hover a panel over your head. You could, so that's why I just say, hey, there's tons of helmets out there, and you can go somewhere else. So you can get a helmet that's cheap and easy to use.
And there are companies who you like that you trust that are doing it in a proper way, that have good products.
I haven't really tested them out myself, but a lot of them, they do get the FDA clearance because to make the hair claims, they have to get the FDA clearance. So I think there's a bunch of brands that have FDA clearance, Capitalist and Theradome, and all these brands. So they're all pretty similar to me. It's just about getting low power, using it consistently. I don't think any of them have anything special sauce of like, oh, we use LEDs or we use lasers, and so they all kind of compete with each other with those goofy claims. But I think it's just get a decent product, don't spend too much on it, use it consistently. There are some cheap helmets on Amazon. I would worry about like the EMFs from those, unless they're battery powered. If something's battery powered, usually it's low EMF because it's not connected to the grid. But so there's a lot of options out there just to shop around.
Awesome. Will you tell us a little bit more about the EMFs and why that's an issue?
Yeah. Yeah, so, EMFs are all around us. There's different types of EMFs. There's electromagnetic frequencies. So technically red and near infrared light are EMFs and they affect us, obviously. So it's kind of not a big stretch of the imagination. Like, hey, if these wavelengths of light affect us that we thought was pseudoscience for years of light therapy and whatnot, it's not a big, leap to start saying, hey, maybe the electromagnetic frequencies in our environment are affecting our cells with calcium ion channels and stress response, and all these studies of coming out. Again, it's something you can't really track. Are we all going to get cancer in 30 years? I don't know. What it's not, but like I'm gonna do some things with my devices and with my environment to reduce my exposure. That's not really going to affect my lifestyle. So with a panel that's like plugged into a wall, you get the alternating current from the wall, and then that gets converted by a driver to send the electricity to the LEDs at the proper kind of current and voltage. So the drivers, that conversion process, that can create a magnetic field of certain kind of milligauss or microtesla, and you can measure that, right? It's a measurable thing. It's not, EMFs are real. You can measure them. You've got devices for them. Engineers, we create devices, motors and pumps and fans and turbines. They all run on, manipulating how EMFs work. So the real things, do they affect the cells in the body? Maybe in subtle ways. And it's kind of death by 1,000 cuts of all these, environmental toxins and EMFs and whatnot. So what I do with my panels is I make sure they're grounded. So you've got a grounding wire that takes the electric field away from the device back to the ground. And then I make sure most of my devices now, I've separated the power adapter separate from the unit. So the panel itself doesn't have that conversion and have those magnetic fields from it. And most of my devices don't have fans anymore. So you can have no fans, and the fans, again, are oscillating that magnetic field, and that's what's creating the EMFs. So I've done a lot of really good work to reduce the EMFs, and because, you don't need a ton of power, it's the best of both worlds. So I have low power devices that don't need fans, don't need, big bulky drivers and heat sinks, separated all that out. So that way you have a panel that you can use close to your skin. You can hold it, you can use skin contact, not have to be afraid of it. Like a lot of my competitors say, oh, you have to be at least 6 inches away to be outside those EMF fields that they know are there. That's why they say, oh, we're no EMF as long as you're 6 inches away, which is kind of code for saying they're high EMF if you're within 6 inches. So it's kind of like goofy phrasing, like I said. So I try to make mine actually low EMF, even if you get close to them, because you want to be able to use them with skin contact for that deeper tissue treatment anyway. So again, it's just balancing all those features and making kind of the best trade-off of a solution. So people just, if you have a health product, you have a sauna, you have all these gadgets for biohacking, you just don't want to introduce more EMFs into your environment, right? So that's kind of the thing. So, and then there's small thing, because a lot of companies will gaslight their customers. They'll be like, oh, well, you use Wi-Fi, don't you? You use a computer, don't you? You use your phone and cell service. Well, unless you throw all those things away, we're not going to reduce the EMFs on our device. So it's kind of like, they're like, oh, well, you already live in an environment with lots of EMFs. What's a little bit more not going to kill you? And it's like, how are you going to make a health device and even have that mentality and treat people that way of like, well, and then are they going to be goofy with their wavelengths, and they're going to be goofy with their intensity? Because if they're going to be, flippant about EMFs and, a health concern that people actually have, they're going to be flipping about everything else too. They just don't care. They just like pumping stuff out, and they gaslight their customers and like, oh, don't worry about EMFs. Don't worry about burning yourself with high intensity. Don't worry about gimmicky, features that you don't need. So, it all kind of ties together of like treating the customer with respect. If my customers, they don't complain about EMFs, we've got the lowest EMFs in the industry. Again, it's not, there's no magic crystal that I hide in my products that reduce the EMFs. It's all just basic science. You can reduce the EMFs if you want. So I just kind of try to do it the right way.
You just told us how you did it. You told us how you reduce
Yeah,
the
no,
EMF.
yeah,
And
it's right. There's nothing right. That's the thing. It's like I'm not some big influencers that's gonna gatekeep all my secrets of like, oh, I won't tell you how I reduce the EMFs. No, I mean, it's right here. It's a little DC. It's direct current, so the panel only gets direct current. It's not AC, and then the adapter is separate. And then there's no fan. There's no fan, so the fan is what creates a lot of EMFs. So again, just basic steps, very transparent. There, and you can measure it. I've shown, on my YouTube channel, barely any change in EMFs. There's always some EMFs in your environment, but when you hold it up to your device while it's on, there's no change. So, so yeah, low EMFs. And then, I kind of mentioned flicker a couple of times. Again, you want flicker is that modulation of brightness. So it's a big problem with a lot of the older LED bulbs and the older fluorescent bulbs that they were making their drivers with a lot of the AC current fluctuating through, and that would cause massive increases in dips in brightness. But it's at a frequency that's so fast that our eye can't really see it. Our eye has this critical flicker fusion that it perceives flicker as continuous when it's above about 60 or 70 hertz. So we perceive it as continuous, but it's actually a lot of stress on our eyes and our brain if you're working, if you're working in an office or, for 8 hours a day, it's a lot of stress on your eyes, and it can cause neurological issues and, stress response and whatnot. So that was kind of a big concern with LED light therapy, that was carrying over some of the flicker issues. So again, that's kind of mostly taken care of with how the power drivers work, and they stabilize the AC, and you can have a very smooth direct current coming to your LEDs and reducing that flicker. But it is an important point to be aware of. Some of the cheaper devices might not be aware of that, and they're not mitigating it, and they just get whatever cheap drivers they can find that might still have that flicker.
We all know how important strength training is for long-term health, but it can be hard to know where to start. I was in the same spot a year ago. You want to make sure you're doing exercises right, avoiding injury, and getting results, but it's easy to feel lost without a plan. That's when I found On Target Fitness. At On Target, you get a custom strength program, personalized attention in a small group setting, and the nutrition coaching you need for real lasting change. In the year I've been working out there, I've gotten stronger, more mobile, and more confident. My form has improved, and even something as simple as walking feels better. The group energy keeps me motivated, and every workout is fun. On Target just opened a new location in Kingston. Now you've got even more options to experience their amazing approach. If you're ready for lasting change, head to www.ontargetfit.com and schedule your session today. Yeah, it's wonderful that you're bringing attention to this and helping people like me and my audience understand like what to look for and what to feel in their body, what to look in before you're buying. Now with the small panel that you just showed us, is that one where you're like how are you using that panel? Because before you said normally you're going to be touching it to your skin, but then also you mentioned that you might have it a little bit further away. Can that small one be, can be used, 12 inches away? Is that one okay for that as well?
Yeah. Like if you want to buy small panels, so usually for like deeper tissue stuff, if you're just putting it right on the body, you can hold it on the body, and usually you only need to do it for like 2 minutes per spot with the spacer that I have here, because it's the higher intensity one with the bulbs that are like tiny bulbs that protrude and press your skin. So you can use these 2 minutes per spot. So you kind of go around different areas. If you got an area of pain, you do the area that has pain, but then you do adjacent areas for, 1 or 2 minutes each as well. So that's kind of how you do your treatments with this device. But yeah, you can still use it for skincare if you're 12 inches away, set it up on a tabletop, aim it at your face, or if you kind of want more subtle superficial benefits, then you use it at a distance away. So basically any of our products, you can kind of have that duality of like if you want deeper tissue, you put it right on the skin. If you want more superficial treatments like the face, you do it about 12 inches away, 10 minutes or so. So you have that versatility of with most of my panels.
For you specifically, are you doing mostly the direct contact work?
Yeah. So yeah, whenever possible, again, except for my face, because I think your face doesn't need the direct contact. You don't need the deep tissue stuff. Your skin is a little bit thinner and it's more responsive to light. So everywhere else on my body, I just plop it right on the skin. You don't have to measure distances. You don't have to set up a whole apparatus and get the angles right. You just plop it right on your skin, hold it there for a couple minutes. Some of my lower powered panels you do for 10 or 15 minutes if they're the lower powered ones. For the higher powered ones, it's like a couple minutes, maybe 5 minutes most per area. So you gotta just read the instructions for a specific device. But yeah, most of the time for face and skincare is I prefer more the distance.
Wonderful. Now, would you, if somebody was, going just, listen to this podcast and decide, hey, I'm going to go try out a GembaRed product, what would the spacer be the first one that you recommended? Or how would you go about, any type of recommendation for your products?
Yeah, it's a good question. I usually like our Rex 2.0. It's our updated model of our Rex. It's a 1 foot by 1 foot square. So it's a nice big coverage area because a lot of times people want those bigger
How big is
panels
the
that cover a big area. This one, I think it's about 5 inches by like 9 inches.
And
So
the next
pretty
one is
easy.
1 by 1.
Yeah, 1 foot by 1 foot, 12
Yeah,
inches
so
by
that's
12.
5 by 9, just so people have an understanding.
Yeah. So the kind of medium sized panels are more popular just because people want that trade off of getting the larger size and the larger coverage area. So we've got the Rex 2.0 and the Beacon 3.0 as great options for those bigger, medium sized panels that cover a big chunk of your torso. You can put it on your stomach, your chest, your back, and you get a lot of systemic benefits. So you don't necessarily need a big full body panel to get a lot of the full body benefits. You just need to cover a big chunk of the body for about 15 minutes. And then the spacer, I would say, is more those deeper tissue treatment. Like I said, it's got the dimpled kind of lenses that really get deeper. For a more versatile one, I would say the Vector 4-wave. So it's the Vector 4-wave. That's similar size. I'm going to reach over here. So like this one is a Vector, so similar size, but it's kind of just more flat lenses. It's got 4 wavelengths. It's 2 in the red and 2 in the near infrared. So it's very versatile, easy to use. You can use it right on the skin or use it for your skincare. So this one's kind of the most versatile for our mini panels that I would say, hey, this is one of our top ones, or the Rex. So, but then, again, there's a lot of nuances. People can email me or message me on Instagram or wherever they can find me and ask if they have more specific questions. But I think most people want the general, multiple wavelengths, 4 or 5 wavelengths, and a decent amount of size. And it kind of covers, if you want skincare, if you want deep tissue, kind of covers a little bit of everything. So, and that's the thing, the red light therapy is so versatile. You don't need to buy like 5 different products, and each product, treats a different thing. So I see people kind of become collectors of red light therapy devices of like, I need a full body, and then I need a device just for my skin, and a device for my hair, and a device, they're very versatile with the wavelengths. Again, it's more about marketing of like, this wavelength cures this, and this device cures that. It's so much overlap of the benefits. It's much more generalized. I tell people to start with just one device, get used to it, get familiar with it, use it. And then if you really feel you need more devices, you probably shouldn't. Then you can buy more later, but don't just like, I get a lot of people that want to buy like 5 products in one go. And I'm like, hey, just get one and get familiar with it. And then, you can buy more later when you figure out what gaps you have. So, but yeah, usually one device should cover like, 99% of your goals with health and whatnot. And the other 1%, you get sunlight, you get heat lamps, you get, some cheap stuff, and you'll cover the rest.
Yeah, these other companies, man, they must not like to see you coming. When you're just telling them, hey, you don't need 5 products, just get this one product that I sell at the cheapest, and I've researched it and done all the, I'm very transparent about all of my data that I've found out and that I've researched.
No, I know. It's like hard to like kind of convince people. It's kind of counterintuitive of like, hey, maybe you don't need a 6 foot tall by 3 foot tall panel setup that covers like an entire wall. of your, of a room. I'm like, that's kind of overkill. You could have one panel that covers most of your torso and get 90% of the same response of like, what, you don't need this oversized thing. So it's kind of like, but I'm kind of telling people what they don't want to hear. A lot of the influencers, they just tell people what they want to hear. Bigger is better, more power is better, more wavelengths are better, all these things. They just tell people what they want to hear. It's not even like manipulative. It's just like, so I often, unfortunately, tell people what they don't want to hear. I tell people what's actually written in the science, that you need only 1 or 2 wavelengths, low power, low intensity, adequate exposure time, small devices, and that's what it is. I'm not here to tell people what they want to hear. I just tell people what the facts are, and it is what it is.
Yeah, man, I love that. I love that model. And I do think it's great. And I think that it's awesome that you simplify it, that you're simplifying it this much, because and that's why I love this, that what we're doing this show about is because there's so many people who are out there that, like, people ask me about, oh, you're doing red light, you're doing this, what type of, biohacks are you doing? What are you doing for your wellness routine? And I tell them, and I don't always have, because before this conversation, I didn't necessarily have the verbose to be able to say, like, hey, this is the way to go. I would just honestly just send them to you and be like, hey, go check out GembaRed. He knows a lot more than I do, and you can parse through his stuff and make sense of it. And but I think this conversation is helping. It will help people understand that, like, you can just get started. You can just get started. And I think it would be awesome if you had a I don't know what type of back end engineering this would take. Software engineering. I don't think that it would be much, but like on your website, if you had, 10 questions or something that somebody comes up to and they say, like, 10 questions, this is what I'm trying to treat, this is what I'm trying to do. And then based on how they answer, it spits out this is the product I would recommend, and a little blurb as to why.
Yeah. That would be fun. Yeah. You got to be careful with how you market it, of like, certain medical claims of people coming to you of like, oh, I have, whatever, Parkinson's, and you have to click, so we can't make medical claims. So that's where it's kind of a gap of vagueness of like, hey, here's a lot of the science, but I can't make any direct claims of what my products can or can't do in terms of, medical conditions. So that's kind of one of the biggest gaps of like, and usually, the people that kind of skirt the laws of making those medical claims, they make a lot of money because they, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy that they attract certain people that are in pain or have certain diseases, and then they make a lot of money, and then they use those testimonials to kind of create a feedback loop of like, oh, look, we made these false claims, and now we're getting testimonials for these false claims. And it's like, so you have to be careful. We don't want it to, unfortunately, red light therapy is really early in those early stages, and we have to follow certain laws for advertising and marketing so we don't get shut down. But so I try to, give people a lot of info, but I can't always give you that last like specific of like how to cure certain things or not. So that's kind of where the biohacking comes in, of people have to try things out and see what works best for them. But like you said, yeah, I'm just all about getting one product. Don't get into too much analysis paralysis. If you need to start with something cheap on Amazon or a heat lamp, or, go to the hardware store, get a heat lamp, you know what I mean? So get started any way you can, because once you actually try it, and you don't overthink it, you need high power and certain wavelengths, get something cheap, get started. You will like be convinced pretty quickly with that, minimal investment, $50, $100 if you get something cheap on Amazon, and then you'll be convinced, and then you'll want the higher quality stuff from me. That's fine. But like, you know what I mean? So it's like, don't let analysis paralysis bust you. It's Glenn Jeffrey was saying in one podcast I was watching of like, don't let like perfect get in the way of like getting that progress. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm a perfectionist, I'm an idealist, but I'm also like an engineer, and I have to get stuff done. So I'm like, you got to balance both worlds. Like, and I'm analysis paralysis. That's my job, to be analysis paralysis. But at some point, you got to make a decision, just try something. And that's part of the learning process too, of like trying it out, seeing what works, trying different protocols. I give you, the ranges of, intensities, exposure times, how often to do it. And you have to tailor it to yourself and, listen to your own body.
where do you think the, red light and photobiomodulation stands in like the greater, like health and recovery tools, where, and what I mean is like, I would put the pillars as like sleep, food, and movement. And sometimes I'm starting to consider light to be like on that same level as those three. I'm just curious what you think, the where this therapy will go, what you think, where does it sit on the, on the tools?
Yeah, I think it's one of the top ones that have just been underappreciated. Like you said, sleep, movement, diet, stress, and light are probably my top five. I don't know, I don't know how I'd order them, but they're all kind of almost interconnected with, like, if you get your light right, your sleep will get better. If you get your light right, your stress will be better. If if your diet, and you sync your diet with your kind of circadian rhythm, you don't eat too late at night. Some people eat breakfast and that helps your circadian rhythm. Some people don't. So some of the diet and circadian timing is also kind of integrated with how you do your light. So it's all kind of tied together. And that was one of the things for me of how I got into light therapy, of like, I was working on my diet, working on my movement, but there was something missing, especially, my sleep issues kept being a problem, and light seemed to be a big part of it, of getting bright light during the day and lower your light exposure at night. That helps you sleep, so getting bright light in the mornings and during the day, and then reducing the blue light and reducing your overall brightness of your lights in your rooms at night, that helps with your whole circadian, your sleep cycle. And then sleep, has a lot to do with food cravings and, food issues and glucose and insulin. So I know that, more than anyone, of having sleep issues, of like this downward spiral of like, you sleep bad and then you crave the junk food to give you a little bit of pickup. And, it's just this downward spiral. So the light is a great intervention for all of that.
Yeah, I can't say it enough either, man. I think that it is such a benefit. And, when I have improved my light environment, like where I sleep and stuff, my sugar cravings are not nearly as, like, I used to wake up in the middle of the night and be like, and this is emotional eating too, but I think that the light had something to do with it. And I was just like, what can I put in my body? It's 1 a.m. Like, where can I get some peanut butter crackers? Can I get some ice cream? Can I get something? I would eat it and then go back to bed, probably destroying my sleep for the rest, for the, cortisol's rising, all this stuff's happening. I might probably destroying my sleep for the rest of the night if I can even get back to bed. And when I started to improve my light, and it's not every day, I still struggle with that stuff sometimes, but I do so much better than I used to with it. And I think that the light has a lot to do with that, as well as the diet, the movement, all of that, doing it. And I think they all go hand in hand.
For sure. Yeah. So I think, it's one of those things. And a lot of people, maybe we subconsciously appreciated the light cycles, but now that the artificial lights have gotten so bad and we're indoors so much, we're so disconnected, that this thing we've taken for granted of being outside in the sun and getting incandescent lights that had some near infrared in it, now that we're so far separated from it, it's kind of like we're going to swing back the opposite way. But we don't want to swing back too hard and overdose on red and near infrared light therapy, and overdo wearing the blue blockers all day every day, so we don't want to swing back too hard. We got to find that balance.
Yeah, I love it. Balance with everything, man. That's really what we need to find, and we have such a hard time doing it. One thing I want to touch on is how you mentioned, like, that it's not a quick fix, and it's, pharmaceutically, like, that is kind of like how we are especially in Western medicine over here. This is what my problem with pharmacy is, like, we just assume this drug is going to fix us, and that's the only thing we're going to do. We're going to take this drug, and then there's, we don't have to wait. It's going to be instant gratification. And that's not with every drug. SSRIs, depression drug, they'll tell you that it takes, 4 to 6 weeks to work. And there are other drugs that take time to get to that level. But I think that it's important for us as a society to realize the shift in narrative around healing and how it should be more focused on things that aren't necessarily like, you don't see this immediate benefit from it. It's like, hey, if you go and do yoga and work out and do sauna for, for 2 weeks, you'll see some benefit and you're going to feel great. You might be a little bit sore too. If you do it for 6 months, and you're consistent about it, it's like you can't even understand the changes that your body and your mind and your spirit will go through.
Yeah, for sure. With red light therapy, it's so complex. It's not really acting on one mechanism like the drug model. Like you need, kind of one drug, and then is it, interacting with a specific, receptor or molecule, and you need one mechanism. That's what red light therapy kind of clung onto with this cytochrome C oxidase mechanism, that it was releasing a nitric oxide that was inhibiting the cytochrome C oxidase on the electron transport chain in the mitochondria to help regulate the ATP production. And ATP is the energy kind of currency of the cell. That ATP energizes, lends its energy to 90% of cellular processes. So it all goes back to this energy production and this very clean model of one mechanism. But we're finding, more and more studies are either debunking this idea, or there's more and more mechanisms. So it's very complex with how red light therapy is reacting. Is it creating exclusion zone water and making the mitochondria a little bit more efficient by excluding the ROS that's in the interstitial fluid of the mitochondria? Is it modulating certain ion channels with micro amounts of heat flux? So there's tons of different mechanisms. It's so intrinsic. It's like trying to explain to someone, hey, what's the benefits of eating protein, of eating, certain fats and, the essential fats and essential proteins, and you can see someone marketing arginine for certain health, and certain carnitine has these benefits, and, tyrosine has this, but it's kind of with the same thing with wavelengths of red light therapy, of you can isolate the wavelengths and have marketing gimmicks for each one, or it's just hey, you need protein. It's good for your existence. You need light, and all these wavelengths of light, they're good for your existence. We don't need to compartmentalize every little mechanism, because it's we kind of get down these rabbit holes and we're caught in the weeds of it's just so holistic for how our mitochondria works. So it does work much more subtly than a drug. A lot of times you don't feel anything with red light therapy. You barely feel any warmth. You just use it for 10 or 15 minutes. A lot of the benefits actually happen 30 to an hour or two after the session has ended. So you don't feel anything during it, but the energy production actually increases to a peak an hour or two after your session has ended, which is kind of crazy. So, and in the pain relief, actually, some of those effects happen 5 or 20 minutes after a session has ended. So you don't keep doing a session forever until you feel pain relief. You need to stop your session at the reasonable time, and then maybe 20 minutes later, you've reduced your severity of your pain. So it's a lot of this is not that instant gratification. You got to have patience with it, and you got to really understand the science and have discipline and do it for a long time. And one thing we're starting to notice is a lot of the, like I said, people that are overdoing red light therapy, they have great benefits in the beginning because they're getting those big doses, but then they taper off or they go back down after a couple of weeks or after a couple of months because they're overdoing it. They're doing too often. They're doing too much power, too much intensity, too much energy. And so they're tapering off with that biphasic response. And it's the cumulative kind of biphasic response. A lot of times we only look at the studies and look at the single dose biphasic response of it, if you get 100 joules per centimeter squared, you're obviously going to be too far on the side. You only need 6 to 10 joules per centimeter squared, right? So if you way overdo it on a single dose, then it's a problem. But what people don't realize is that the cumulative dose response is going to creep up on you if you do it too often, or again, if you're doing too much energy for every single dose. So yeah, it's definitely, you're playing the long game. It's low and slow wins the race.
Low and slow wins the race. It's so interesting because it makes me wonder, because I know other things that have these same benefits, yoga, meditation, sound healing, that you don't necessarily see the benefit right off, and it's something that you have to do, for a little while, to really get the benefits from. And I see some of those things being implemented into like the hospital insurance-based model. I'm wondering if red light ever makes it there.
Yeah, I'm starting to see a lot of insurance agencies have put out statements where they analyze the studies, and if they're very meticulous, they're very good at analyzing it. They're not going to fluff things up or do things the wrong way, but they're much more shrewd in taking the more negative approach towards you better have rock solid, evidence, big, clinical trials, randomized control trials, and, meta-analysis. So they're not convinced yet, but, there's the PBM Foundation is working on that side of things with the government of getting FDA recognition for photobiomodulation devices. So they just got a new term for photobiomodulation devices specifically like a year or two ago. So they got that on the record because a lot of companies were getting their devices registered as a heat lamp as kind of a loophole because there was no code that existed for photobiomodulation devices. So it's very slow, incremental. Again, we have to have patience with the science and not try to oversell it, because if we oversell it, we already saw this happen historically, that there was a rise in, light therapies and red light therapies in the early 1900s with Niels Finsen, John Harvey Kellogg with his light therapeutics book, all these guys that were researching it in the 90s to like the 1930s, but then that got squashed by mainstream medicine, big pharma, starting to take things over. And it was, also kind of a detriment that they were kind of going too far with their medical claims and not having really good evidence for light therapies. So light therapy got squashed from like the 40s all the way up to the 80s. And it's only now that we're really back to where we were 100 years ago of like, and we don't want to lose it again with charlatans making crazy claims. So we want light therapy to be, taking its time and getting the evidence where it needs to be before we make crazy claims.
Is that so? Just so I'm clear, when you're talking about John Harvey Kellogg, he was an old school influencer who was throwing too many gimmicks at people.
Yeah. Right. And if you look at some of the history books, depending on who wrote them, he was a big fraud and he was a big,
crazy person.
He did things the wrong way.
Sorry to call it, defaming him. The man was, had some type of psychosis, and he was, what he put people through was kind of wild. And, maybe it worked for some, but like it was a pretty hairy operation, I would say, at whole.
Right. So that's the thing. It's like, hey, these guys were on the right path, but they maybe took things a little too far, or maybe the mainstream history, the people who wrote the history books, they kind of put them in a bad light. And so that's what we don't want to happen again. We don't want red light therapy to be some big fad, some bubble, some pump and dump. I feel like a lot of influencers and brands are treating it like a pump and dump. They're going to make a ton of money based on false claims, and then they're going to walk away when the bubble pops, and they're going to have their money. They're going to make it out clean. But we want to be in for the long haul, even for the science of being very meticulous with how things progress.
Yeah, it's and especially in this environment where we are going, like people are seeing things the way that I see it now, in that like they're like, oh, pharmaceuticals are not the be all end all. We do have other ways holistically to heal ourselves via supplements, via plants, via light, magnetism, water, working out, movement, diet, all these amazing holistic things. The problem could be is sometimes is you overhype something and you get so excited that then at the same time comes over regulation. So right now I think we're in a period where there's probably not enough regulation. There's probably not enough oversight in the market, where there has to be people like you who are saying, like, guys, there's a bunch of people who are lying and a bunch of people who are doing gimmicks and stuff like this. This is actually what's going on. And I think the slow roll, like what you're talking about, can be brilliant to get to the point where the regulation is at the right spot. But if it gets too big too quickly, FDA gets a hold of it, everything's overhyped, and then it's overregulated, and then it's like, oh man, now we don't even have access to this technology anymore because we only think it can be done in the doctor's office.
Right. Yeah. So that's the thing. You kind of saw it with the CBD industry of like the FDA just steamrolling the CBD stuff and like, all, but again, they were the CBD, marketing claims were taking it too far. So I just see the same thing could happen with red light therapy. All these brands making claims, the influencers are making claims that don't have good support. They're not FDA approved to make certain claims. And then you get over-regulated, and then I'll be caught in the crossfire. So I prefer more what's called self-regulation, that this industry needs to regulate itself. There's a couple, like I said, the PBM Foundation is trying to create a standardized kind of test method for everyone, but they're charging $6,500 for me to test a single lamp, and that's a lot.
You should do it.
My third-party lab only charges me $700. So they're out of control.
This is what I'm saying to you right now. You are, compared to the PBM Foundation, which I've never even heard of, compared to you, who is the leading expert, and the person is the the foremost expert in this in the country, I would say, in terms of like, I'm serious about that, man. You should be the one who are testing these products. You should be the one who are, you should create your own, your own.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think I need to, because then again, it's all on me. I'm testing other people, and I've got a conflict. But I'm calling these guys out. They know what they're doing wrong. But again, they need to be doing it themselves. It shouldn't be on me to call them out. They should be regulating themselves, getting proper testing, being transparent. And if they're not, then I can call them out. They can call me out if I do things wrong. It's free speech, and it's how we self-regulate. Because we don't want, people have emailed me like, oh, well, maybe, Robert Kennedy will help regulate the red light therapy industry. I was like, I don't need anyone else to regulate this. I want minimal regulations, but we need to be able to follow some basic, rules of decorum and ethics and, marketing law of like, don't false advertise, don't make claims that you don't have evidence for. Those are foundational marketing. You don't need special oversight to follow basic, advertising law, ethics, that it's already all there.
I wish it could just be a human being. People could just be human beings and be like, oh, I'm not trying to manipulate these people. Like the CBD thing, man, is the great. I was actually going to even mention that when I asked the question, but I wasn't sure if you would, if you would understood that market as well. And then you say it, because it's exactly what it was. It was CBD. CBD is awesome. It's actually this really great, plant substance that has tons of uses. Is it going to cure cancer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't say. I don't know. It's worth trying.
Maybe it can help a little bit.
Right. It's a low risk.
Just throw a ton more shit against the wall to cure cancer. Sorry. That's just the way that it is. A long deterioration of toxin got into your system, or you had some type of dysfunction over a long period of time that caused this. So taking a little bit of CBD, yeah, sure, it can be helpful, but we can't go out there and just say this is gonna cure cancer. And I hope that red light doesn't get there either.
No, I know. Yeah. So so I'm worried. We've been getting closer and closer. And then again, we're starting to see more and more people complain with overheating and, feeling overstimulated and, stuff that shouldn't even be a thing with red light therapy. It's low intensities that are so safe. You can't hurt yourself unless you're really reckless. So the manufacturers are being really reckless with promoting high intensities and then paying off influencers to saying, oh, it's totally normal to feel a lot of heat and overdose. And it's like, why would you even say that? No doctor would recommend overdosing a drug or a therapy unless you just have no clue what you're doing. So hopefully, we're getting the word out. We're fighting back against, and it's kind of like people accuse me of being like, I'm part of Big Pharma because I'm calling out the health influencers, but I'm like, well, I don't know, so it's kind of works around like if I call out health influencers like Andrew Huberman, who I was criticizing how he was talking about red light therapy a couple of weeks ago. They're like, oh, well, you're like part of pharma and you're calling out Huberman. I was like, I just want him to be more accurate with red light therapy. It has nothing to do with Big Pharma. I don't know what that means, but I get what they're saying. But
you have to be a part of the opposition. Yeah,
right. If you're a part of if you're criticizing your own team, there's a lot of this like same team mentality of like you can't criticize other health influencers, otherwise you're part of Big Pharma. It's like, I don't know, because a lot of the bad influencers and brands are working together to create these false narratives to begin with. So you need some people to be contrarians and to call things out. and that's, again, it's all part of the, you know, free speech and criticism and self-regulating of like, hey, if someone's doing something wrong, you got to call it out. You got to question them. You got to ask them for evidence. If people want to be more evidence-based, don't just sit back and mindlessly trust what Huberman or other influencers are saying. Say, hey, where's your references? Where's your data? What's your specifics on these claims? So like, that's the thing,
Yeah, it's 100%, the truth, and just, getting people to have discourse is all we need.
Yeah.
A little bit more discourse, a little bit, stop being so emotional. Don't be tied to your identity is not always what you believe, so like, because it's great. It's across every single spectrum, it's like, oh, if you are supporting this person, then you are a part of the opposition. And it's like, no, I just don't agree with this person, and I'm just trying to educate them. It's like the politics thing,
right.
It's like someone as a lifelong Democrat, doesn't agree with what the Democrats are currently doing. And it's like, oh yeah, I don't agree with what they're doing here. And they're like, oh, you are a conservative, you are MAGA, you are this. And it's like, no, people, let's just have the conversation so we can actually figure out what can be improved upon in our world.
Yeah, we kind of lose a lot of nuance, and things need to be very polarized of one side or another. And there's a lot of nuance in the middle that needs to be fleshed out. And, it's hard to get there when we're so binary, everything's one sided.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. And that's why I really appreciate what you're doing and, everything that you got going on at GembaRed, because you are not that. You are just like, hey, this is the information. I want to give it to you. I'm not going to shove it down your throat, but this is what I know based on my expertise, my experience, my firsthand testing, and you can take it or leave it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, like you said, it's not about manipulation or marketing. It's like, hey, the facts are the facts. I don't need to, you can research it. It is a lot to take in if you want those fine details, but I try to bring it back to the groundedness of like red light therapy, simple, safe, low intensity, low in energy, or some red and near infrared wavelengths, super effective. Like that, there's nothing fancier than that. But if you want to get fancy, you can lose your mind on my blogs, and I have tons of references, and I can get as fancy as you want, but we can keep it simple, and you can go from there. So anyway, the level of complexity of like, hey, you want to take a CBD thing and learn all the mechanisms, or you just want to take it and see if you feel better? I don't know.
Yeah, well, whatever you want. And if you want some math, math or science, definitely go check out Andrew's blog, because it's there.
Yeah, for sure. I got it. Yeah,
you got it all, dude. I love it, because it's like, it brings me back to like studying for school and studying for something that I'm really trying to learn and research. And I'm like, dude, this guy, he has it all here. He has all the screenshots. He's really like, his aim is to actually teach people, and people can learn from this, and not necessarily if they have a scientific background or not. You put it down in terms where most people, I think, could, the layperson would be able to understand it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, you got to learn the terminology. It's like learning a new language. When you learn a new science, you got to learn all these new terms. It's like learning a language. It's like milliwatts and joules and wavelengths and nanometers and, all that stuff. So once that's the biggest learning hump. I saw some influencer interviewing Dr. Hamlin, and they called it millivolts. And I'm like, the people don't even know what they're asking. And that's why there's so much misinformation of like, they don't even know the basic terminology, even when they're interviewing the leading experts. So that's like the biggest kind of learning curve, right? And then you can kind of get into like a lot of my blogs and science and graphs and, equations of, again, it really helps having that background of science. And I try to bridge the gap of like, lay people, can take some time. They have to reread, my blogs a couple times, but I try to be very technically accurate. So it's very hard to write with like a good writing style, like, because you're so it's like writing a technical report. It's not like writing a story that I can make things flow. It's like, here's some evidence-based information. Here are the parameters. Here's the conclusion. But like, it's very dense. So yeah. So again, people got to just take their time. And like I said, in parallel, get a cheap device, start using it, do the research in parallel, and kind of juggle both, because you need the experience. There's nothing I can do to like, you can read all the research in the world, but like you got to just try red light therapy out, and it'll demystify it so much, because it's very much more simple. You just shine a light. You're like, wow, I spent months researching, all these wavelengths and all these intensities and all these guys saying different things. And then you get a device, and it's much more simple than you ever could have imagined. Like, you know what I mean? So that's the thing. It's like, if once you try it, the mystery is gone. Like, you know what I mean? You just get a light, shine it on you, boom. So it's like, so there's a lot of, that's the thing of like, how do I connect to you through a screen and through a device, and I can have charts and graphs and pictures all day long, but until you experience it, that's when you really feel it, and it makes it less of a big fancy science thing or a big magical thing. It's just light. I don't know.
Yeah, man, I love it. I think that you're simplifying it for people in a great way. What's next for GembaRed? Are you just going to continue down this path where you're producing high quality panels and educating people?
Yeah, I have a really good product lineup right now. I've got maybe, 1 or 2 new products in the works. So I'm kind of turning over, a couple different products, but generally, yeah, I'm pretty good with all my products in the current generation, ultra low EMF, low flicker, easy to use. So I think I've really gotten my product line really dialed in over these past 7 years. So I think, just come to me if you got questions, and I'm always just doing research, trying to find what doctors and scientists are saying as the latest info. And a lot of it's not new. It's like, kind of reinforcing what we already know. So a lot of my older blogs are just as relevant as they are today. There's just new evidence that's reinforcing them. So, one of my latest blogs, I just went into how important exposure time is. And a lot of people are focusing on the energy that you absorb, but there seems to be a special mechanism of the exposure time. It's almost like a stimulus and an exposure time that triggers a metabolic change in the body. So it's not all about, oh, I need to absorb 10 joules of energy and then my cells will respond a certain way. Your cells don't understand joules of energy. That's an engineering term, like of energy, like, what I mean? So how are you going to expect cells to respond to certain amount of energy? So it's more like, think about like your sauna, where you have a certain temperature and you sit in there for like whatever, 20 or 40 minutes. It's like a cold plunge. You have a certain temperature and you sit in there for a couple minutes. So it's like a stimulus and an exposure time, and it's not all about just calculating energies, like, what I mean? So that's kind of a big pivot, but I connected back to, there's tons of research that have been saying this for years. It's just a couple new research has come out confirming it. So that's a big pivot for how people need to think about dosing red light therapy.
Yeah, wonderful. If people want to, is it best for them to reach out on the website, to reach out on the Instagram? What's the best way for them to get in contact with you if they have any questions?
Yeah, I'm good by email. You'll find my contact info on the website, GembaRed@gmail.com, or just, find me GembaRed.com. But yeah, just search GembaRed and you'll find my socials, my website and all that stuff. So type that in, GembaRed, Andrew LaTour, and you'll find me. But yeah, send me emails, direct message on Instagram's pretty good. But yeah, I'm usually pretty good at replying if you got specific questions. And like I said, just take your time going through the website, take a look at the products, look at the pictures, think about how you're going to actually use them, as opposed to, people kind of think about the benefits and they think about when are you going to use it, where are you going to use it, what part of the bodies do you need to treat, and think about how you're going to implement red light therapy in your lifestyle. Because it does take, it takes a little time. So you got to set aside the time and really envision when and where you're going to do it. And that's where you'll get the best results if you can just use it consistently.
Use it consistently. Reach out to Andrew over at GembaRed.
Yep.
Make sure you pay homage to Uncle Jack for the sunlight.
Right.
Please, giddy up, Andrew. Today has been awesome, man. I've learned so much from you. I do hope that you will come up to Southern Maine here and have a conversation with me in person sometime soon.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Giddy up. We will see you next time. I am definitely excited to get some more red light in my life and to share it with everybody. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Guys, make sure you like, subscribe to Andrew's page, to my page. It helps us grow. It helps us continue doing this. And until next time, giddy up.